It is important to note that on page 29, the images Marti includes shows cutting for a 12-inch block. Remember, we're only going to be cutting for an 8-inch block. We'll need our Kaleido ruler and a rotary ruler. Find the location on the Kaleido ruler that says 8-inch block. It also says to cut our strips at 4.5 inches. We're going to let our ruler do the work by lining up that 8-inch block line right on the straightened edge of our fabric. Once I've done that, I'll move the ruler into place, slide the block down the fabric, and make sure our ruler is in place. Once we've done that, we're ready to make our first cut. You'll be able to get 16 Kaleidoscope units from one 4.5-inch strip. So you'll need a second 4.5-inch strip. You'll use the same method and line up the Kaleido ruler along the straight edge cut. And once you've made sure that you have that straight on both sides with your Kaleido ruler, go ahead and make that second cut. Stack the two strips on top of each other, and I'll show you how we're going to cut our units. We'll start by putting the 8-inch block line on the straight line of our fabric. Make our cut. Make our cut the opposite direction. We'll turn our ruler over. Again, line up our straight line there. Make our next cut. We're cutting 4 triangles at a time. We need to have 26 total. So we'll be making 7 units. I've cut the 7 units. I'll have 2 extra triangles. I can just set those aside. It's not necessary to engineer the corners, so we can go ahead and stack our units right on top of each other. Our next cut is the 28 right and left half Kaleido angles. Marti's pattern on page 7 says to take a look at page 32 for learning how to cut those Kaleido angles. You're going to want to make sure you pay attention to this part of the demo because this is a difficult block to cut. You'll begin with a 4.5-inch piece. You'll end up cutting that strip the same way that you cut the previous 2 strips, which is to use your Kaleido angle ruler to set the width, the 8-inch block width, 4.5-inch strip for your strip. Once you've done that, turn your strip to the side and use your ruler to square off the selvage edge. To cut the Kaleido half pieces, you'll notice that through the center of the Kaleido ruler there are 2 dashed lines. Those are the lines we're going to be lining up with when we cut our half pieces. On page 32, Marti's instructions demonstrate how you do that. You take the left side of the dashed lines and you go ahead and you place that along your straight edge. And you make your cut. This will give you 2 pieces, which are the right and the left half Kaleido. The right and the left half Kaleido angles. This is 1 piece, we need 28. It's this next cut that becomes more difficult. There is no point on Marti's ruler that allows you just to turn the ruler over and make the next cut. So you truly will just take your piece from before that you've just cut, lay it on your fabric, and cut right next to it. Now we have 4 pieces, 2 rights and 2 lefts. We go back to our instructions and we cut the next piece, again lining up the left side of the dash marks with the straight edge of our fabric. And we'll use that piece, turn it over, to mark where we cut our next piece. Now we have 4 rights and 4 lefts. We'll continue to do that until we have all 28 pieces. You'll need 2 strips of fabric. Returning to the instructions for cutting on page 7, the pattern tells us to cut 24 corner square triangles for the 8-inch blocks. You need to refer to page 31 of Marti's instructions to learn how to cut those corner square triangles. At the bottom of page 31, Marti has instructions for cutting the corner triangles. The first instruction involves cutting triangles one at a time. The second instruction involves cutting squares and then cutting them in half diagonally. That's the one I'm going to demonstrate for you now. On Marti's ruler, you will find the markings that show 16-inch, 15-inch, 14-inch, 13-inch, 12, 11, 10, 9, and 8-inch blocks. Turn the ruler over, take the 8-inch block line, and line it up with the straight edge of your fabric. Put your rotary ruler in place. And make your cut. You'll need just 1 strip. You'll need to square off the selvage end. Again, using that 8-inch block line and any other line on the ruler to make sure that you have 2 square corners, you'll make your cuts. You'll need to cut 12 squares, and then when we cut those in half, you'll have 24 half squares. Once those squares are cut, you turn the ruler on its side and make your cut diagonally for the half square. Going back to the cutting instructions on page 7, it's now time to cut our background white fabric. You'll notice that we'll be cutting the identical number of blocks in the same units that we did in our first cutting. So just follow those same methods. The next fabric we're going to cut is the fabric that Marti indicates on her pattern as red. For our store sample, we're using this turquoise. Marti's cutting instructions say to cut 8 Kaleido angles for the 8-inch block. You'll do that the same way as we did for both the dark and the light. Using your Kaleido angle ruler on the 8-inch block line, you'll cut your strip and then make your 8 units from that. You'll follow Marti's piecing instructions on page 8 and 9 for piecing the Kaleidoscope blocks. We'll start out by chain piecing the light to the dark. I like to begin my chains with a beginner so that I don't have a rat's nest of threads at the beginning of my first block. Once you've chain pieced all 24 of those blocks, go ahead and start chain piecing your light blocks with the dark half triangle. For pressing, you'll flip the units over, set your seam on the dark side, and then press open. That first seam will be pressed towards the center triangle. The second seam will be pressed the same direction, but it'll be pressed towards that outside half triangle. Okay, once you've sewn the second side to your kaleidoscope triangle, you're going to set your seam and press it open that direction so that both seams will be going the same direction. And that's real evident in Marti's instructions on page 8. The next thing that we need to do is to add the half square to the bottom of the unit. Marti tells us on page 7 that we're going to need to engineer these corners, and we will. You can see that without the engineered corner, you would have to slightly overlap your triangles, whereas if we have the engineered corner, the piece lays on perfectly for your 1/4 inch seam. To engineer the corners on these half squares, there's not a specific tool that fits this half square perfectly. So you can do one of two things. You can take set A, set B, set T, any set that has a half square triangle, and set it on the unit, lining up the long edge and the straight edge here. The image on the bottom of page 7 of Marti's pattern makes it clear that you're only engineering one side of that corner. On each side of the triangle, you're only engineering that piece that is perpendicular. On our website, on our From Marti and Me Club page, you'll notice that we have links to Marti Michelle's website that links up different videos that she has put together on the different instruments. There are 4 links for the Kaleido ruler. Thank you for joining us this week with our From Marti and Me Club. Again, I'm Teresa Coenen from Stitchin Quilts. See you next time.